All right. Can everybody see my screen?
Perfect.
Excellent. So, great introduction for the architectural team. We're about a 95 person plus firm. We're located in Chelsea, Massachusetts, but we do work in a number of different states across the country. We are the, a design, architecture, interior design firm, and we do a lot. We, as far as our sectors go, we obviously adaptive reuse, historic preservation, new construction, high rise, assisted living, hospitality, residential. We have a lot of different projects that we are able to go through. And as we go through here, we'll get to Yarnworks, which was my project. So this mill was Fitchburg, is located in Fitchburg, Massachusetts, which is, if you know Mass at all, it's about central Mass. It's up north, up towards the Vermont and New Hampshire border. This particular mill originally was built in 1907, and on average, it's employed about 300 to 400 employees at its peak. It did run about 800 employees in the facility. It was built and constructed on the banks of the Knockage River, which gave it its power. And the reason why we chose this particular project to present today is because it's something that, as far as sustainability and with repurposing these mills, something more and more that we're finding is, since they are built on water or next to bodies of water, and that's what they used for their electricity and energy, that it's also with the rising flood levels. These mills require a little bit of design because the floors are within floodplains. So the major issue that we ran into this project was the floodplain, and I'll kind of go into that a little bit later, which we ended up having to raise the existing floor about 27 inches. So not a small amount. And I'll kind of go over that stuff. This is some additional information on the site. The site itself is quite large, 7.4 acres. The mill itself is 3 stories. When we went in and converted it, we were able to convert it into 96 units, 39 of which were designated as affordable. The others would be the market rate for the Fitchburg area. It had about a $24 million development cost, and we were LEED certifiable, meaning that we did materials and construction could all be documented to go for that certification at the end of the project, should the owner want to go for that designation. On this one, they did not, but we are also Energy Star certified for low rise in Massachusetts. Again, this is an exterior shot of the mill, which it's quite beautiful actually. Once we were done with it, but this mill was actually, when it was first constructed, it was actually constructed quite quickly and quite efficiently. So see, 7 months and basically a cost of about $600,000 back in 1907. And then at the height of its production, it was about 95,000 spindles and 3.5 million plus miles of yarn were created there each week, and then shipped and used across the country. This mill was actually very close to the Maine and New Hampshire railroad systems. So was able to get out and get out. The product was able to get out to across the country. Some other fun facts about the mill, just in terms of the quantity of the materials that were used. And the reason why we kind of state this is because the materials that you're seeing right there are all remain on site. So as far as sustainability, repurposing a building is about as green as you can get. You're keeping all of that embodied energy that was already brought to the site on the site. You're not paying additional costs for demolition. You're not paying, fuel costs. You're not contributing to the carbon footprint by, the equipment and the transportation needed to demolish and remove the materials on site. Also, to build ground up, you have to bring on new materials on site. So when you think about sustainability, please always try to reuse your existing buildings first before going ahead and trying new construction. So these are some existing photos of the that a couple slides ago of the large 3 arch bay windows up on the upper left here. That was the original state that we run into. Now, this mill was very clean. It was very dry. That's some of the things that you want to look for when you do your initial site visits or site walks of the property. Obviously, most of these structures were built using wood. So if you have leaks in your roof over time, water and wood do not mix, usually ends up in dry rot, and not a good thing. So when we walk through these buildings, we're really looking to see how well, the building was maintained. Obviously, we can see past all of the, it doesn't look pretty at this point. We can look past all of that, and we can kind of see the beauty that's kind of behind all of the paint and the crumbling kind of materials that are around when we first get there. But this building was very clean and very dry. They kept it well maintained. It was required to be sprinklered by the city, so it was kept tempered inside. Very clean. One of the perfect mills that you come across and would like to renovate. There's very little structural damage other than when we had to raise the first floor. But again, had we not been in that floodplain, that first floor could stay where it was. So as I kind of touched upon before with the flood mitigation, you can tell, when the project was finished, you could pretty much open up your window, stick a fishing pole outside and fish from the Knockage River. But, unfortunately with FEMA and their flood rate insurance maps, the site itself was within the floodplain. And as I mentioned, we had to raise that first floor elevation 27 inches, and that was just to get the floor above the floodplain. I think we were only above the floodplain by about a foot at that point. So nonetheless, we were able to do that. The other interesting fact is that the crawl space of this mill was actually used as flood mitigation. So the site was intended to flood, during the winter runoffs, the snow melt that would come down from the White Mountains would come through the Knockage River. So the site was actually built to flood, and there were actually spillways built into the foundations that would allow the crawl space to fill up with water. Thus, the site would not fill up with as much water. So that was some early engineering in terms of flood mitigation. When we got onto the site, we were required by the Conservation Commission and by FEMA to maintain that flood mitigation and that flood storage that was already the capacity that was already assumed for the site. We could not change that. So basically, any grading that we had to bring in to make the site work, any volume of soil that we brought in, we had to make sure that it was taken out from somewhere else so that we kept that balance of flood capacity within the site. So you'll see when we came through, we did have some grading. We did have to raise the grade around the building in some areas. So in order to do that, we basically just had to dig a hole at another portion of the site so that that same volume could be filled up with water should the site flood. We back in the 1900s, they might have gotten more snow and stuff. We have not seen the site flood as much as the capacity that should be there, which is a good thing. But nonetheless, we still had to account for that with our design. This is some of the existing photos of this crawl space. So this is the crawl space that was meant to flood. So you can see, just over time what it's done to the steel, just having that moist kind of environment down below. So these are some existing piers that the steel was on. These are granite foundations, and then the brick piers. The other thing you could tell in this picture on the right is after all of the machinery and everything was removed from the site, there was some bounce back, or the steel kind of corrected itself. So a number of locations, the steel was actually not touching these piers. There's also some settlement within the foundations that also led to this. So this was another kind of interesting fact when we went down into that crawl space, is that a lot of this existing steel wasn't actually being supported. It was just free spanning. So going back, this is the bottom left is what we encountered when we first started to demo. This picture on the right shows the floor demo that we performed. You could see the moisture in the water that was in the crawl space. We came in March or April, so we were just at that high point of the season with the water. So you can tell this is not a good situation for steel, especially to be in that moist situation. So what we had to do is we took off all the decking, removed all the steel, and we ended up, you could start to see a new ledger that was starting to be put on there. So this is the floor that we ended up raising about 27 inches. To do the flood mitigation, I mentioned that the foundation had spillways built into the foundation, and that we had to go through and we had to raise some of the grading around the site. So kind of a solution that we had, because we still had to open up that crawl space for the flood capacity storage. The solution that we came up with was to install these grates into the sidewalk that when the water, if the flood levels were ever to get this high, the water would be able to spill through the grates and into the crawl space as it was originally designed to do. So we could not plug up those spillways because that crawl space was part of the overall flood storage, and we did not have the capacity on the rest of the site to dig a hole in order to offset the infill that we would have brought into that crawl space. So that crawl space had to remain as part of the flood capacity. So when we came back, existing photos of the site. So the ends of the brick were whitewashed. At some point over time, there were some loading bay doors that were there, but we ended up with the funding that we received from Park Service in conjunction with our state funding for the low-income housing tax credits. We were able to kind of strip all the existing paint on the exterior of the wall, We did extensive studies into the existing windows, some of which were still on site, so that we could replicate those windows. Previously, the windows for the mill, they had a fixed bottom sash and they had a hopper for the upper sash, meaning that the window tilted outwards. So if it rained or whatnot, water would be able to come back in. But they did that so that, you know, the heat would be able to escape through the tops of the windows. So when we go back through with our historic replications, we have to match, you know, the profiles and sizes of the windows. We don't necessarily need to match the operation. So you can tell we were, instead of doing the upper windows as a hopper, we were able to do an awning window on the bottom. And this actually added to our sustainability because in turn, in using a double hung window, which does not have a lot of air quality, the awning window is actually a lot more airtight. So in terms of, we were doing blower door tests and unit compartmentalization on these units. So when we use these awning windows, the leakage, the air leakage, you know, combined with our masonry restoration efforts, meaning the repointing of the exterior masonry and the rebuilding and that the units were actually very tight. They had very little air leakage, which added to that efficiency because we were only able to insulate the bedrooms of these units. We had to leave the brick exposed in the living areas. So obviously there's no real thermal value in brick. So we tried to make that up with the repointing and the energy efficient windows that were going in there to try to make that space as efficient as possible. Some more photos of the interior. So this is what the interior looked like after it was sandblasted. And the other interesting feature on this site was the existing chimney, which we had to take down the top 10 feet of that chimney, and we rebuilt it on site down on the ground. And we capped it, and then we raised that portion of the chimney back in place. So again, because of the National Park Service and the historical restrictions, you know, we couldn't just, you know, demo the chimney or leave the chimney in its current state. We wanted to cap that chimney to make sure that there was no water infiltration coming in and further deterioration to that structure. So we were able to restore that and then also usher it in to the next 100 years of its existence. We also maintained a lot of the existing wooden stairways. This mill was great because it actually utilized the structural steel instead of wood beams. So it was a nice combination of steel and wood. At the end of the day, made a nice contrast with the steel painted black, and then just the natural finish on the wood, which was able to be left. We were able to get some additional insulation on the roof. Current mass code is R30 continuous when you're above the roof deck, and we were able to go R40 with the EPDM mechanically attached rubber roof. And this is what we do. So the upper left is how we walked into it.
Yeah. Wow. Wow.
So you can really tell this is how we walked into it, and the two photos on the right is how we left it. So the layout itself, just the open floor plan with just the columns, really kind of leads itself to you know, wherever your design wants to take you. Obviously, we start with the client. We try to get a unit count based on their funding resources, make that unit count work in terms of their performance, and then we begin the interior design. We house an interior design staff, which we work closely with, and they curate a lot of the colors and some of the artwork for the common areas. But then we also work with them with just the overall aesthetics of the space. So as you could tell, the exterior walls were left exposed, but with the size of the windows back in the, when these mills were constructed, they used a lot of daylighting. Some of it, was, to save costs on energy. Some of the mills were built before, electricity was available. So daylighting was very useful. So we, although we weren't able to insulate and kind of make the exterior wall as efficient as possible. There really wasn't a lot of wall space after the windows were taken into account. So we try to address the give a nod to the past. We're not trying to cover anything up. I actually call a lot of the existing features beautiful imperfections. That's what we're looking for. We don't want it to be perfect. We want it to be original, and that's what we strive to do in these cases. So we try to put a lot of that in viewable areas by leaving the deck exposed, using the beams, leaving the beams exposed, and leaving the exterior brick exposed.
Absolutely gorgeous, beautiful.
Yep. And so we just have this is kind of a ground floor, kind of shows how we design the area. So the blues are residential units. The other colors are, amenity space, spaces as you come through. The information on the right is our typical kind of programming, this programming for this mill. But we also like to include, these are residencies, these are communities. There were communities when they were first built, often in employing, much of the town. So when we come and convert them with our clients, we want them to be communities themselves. So a lot of that is having amenity space either in the building or on site, and having areas for the residents to be able to utilize.
We had a question in the chat about the
Yes.
use of gypsum with the humidity from the river. Was there anything special that needed to be done?
No, because of the gypsum, even though we had any of the humidity from the river and also from the crawl space down below, what we did with the crawl space is we called it a reverse bathtub. So we actually sprayed the walls and the underside of the decking with a high density spray foam, so that we had that thermal break between the residential units and the unconditioned crawl space. So what that did is it did, created the insulation, but it also left a foam product that was not susceptible to moisture, that kind of created that moisture block as well. So, and then once you get into the building, everything is heated and cooled. So the moisture levels inside the building are pretty much regulated and maintained. So we were just able to use standard drywall. We did use moisture resistant and non-paper face drywall in the bathrooms and kitchens and any of the wet walls that were in the scheduled in the amenity spaces, for instance, so that any water or anything that may have gone from a plumbing issue would not create any mold issues, and that's part of the sustainability with the enterprise green communities and the LEED certifiable, is to use that non-paper face drywall.
That's great. What are we looking at here? Are those
So
amenities?
this is the boiler. This is the former boiler house. So this we made into our common. This is our basically our tenant lounge and our common area. So we put in a kitchen area, dining area. There's a ping pong table, which I'm a billiard player. I did call for a billiard table to be put in there, but I was value engineered and a ping pong table went in instead, which is about the only regrets I have for this project. But so yeah, we try to create these amazing spaces just with what we're given. And I think we knocked it out of the park with this, with the existing trusses. We were able to go through. We obviously, you could see the steel on them that we had to put in there just to brace them up, bring them up to today's code. But I think it. Shit.
We still see you, Scott. I
Oh,
just
I'm
don't
sorry.
think we don't see your PDF.
Yeah,
But
no, I apologize.
but you know what? I think that was towards the end anyway, wasn't it? Of your presentation?
Yeah, no, sorry. We just had some more interior photographs that were there. I really apologize about that.
No, no worries. Listen,
So-
it's fine. Why don't we hop over to the other project and Jason, and then we'll come back for questions if you don't mind hanging on.
No, that sounds great.
Okay, great.
I think we might be having the same issue, Scott. I've lost connection to the office.
Oh,
Oh,
well, you know what?
You know what?
Have a
Here,
back.
hold on. Yeah, hold on 1 second. Actually, I
wait,
can get
it's coming.
I can
Is
get
it
the
coming?
presentation.
I'm back on.
Yay.
Did yours come back up, Scott?
No, not yet.
Interesting.
Well, let's move because it's 6. We're halfway through our time here, so I want to make sure we
Yep.
also get to 100 Shamit. Jason Gear is with us as well. He's a lead AP, is a project manager with the architectural team, an award-winning architecture, interiors, and planning firm based in Chelsea, Massachusetts. We've said that before. More than 10 years of experience, he's responsible for the successful coordination and management project planning, design, production, community review, and construction administration. His expertise encompasses a variety of sectors, including multifamily, hospitality, mixed use, and assisted living. An intuitive problem solver, as we just saw, his approach to projects is centered on a multifaceted collaborative process, seeking client, end user, contractor, and design team member input. So take it away, Jason Gear. Tell us all about 100 Shaman.
Can you make the other person with my name able to share?
Allison?
I'm on it. Are you?
Good.
I was
Thank
gonna
you.
say, I've got you.
I'm kind of multi-devicing. I think Scott was doing the same.
Yeah, you're all set.
Okay, perfect. As long as I can find it. There we are. Scott, this is kind of where you left off. You can come back and hit these if you want. Just a few more views were there. So 100 Shaman Avenue. This is a project that is in the south end of Boston. For those of you that know Boston, this is the Pike, I-90. You're kind of looking toward Copley Square, and then downtown is on the, across the Pike, across the face of the building here. This was permitted together with 2 adjacent sites that were owned by local community organizations. We were able to put together a PDA plan, taking advantage of some updated zoning, some recently updated zoning, allowed us in this district to go up to 150 feet. And as long as we got everybody to work together, we had enough space and enough interest in the city and from the local community to, use the word exploit, but to take advantage of the full zoning envelope on the 3 sites. That does make it so that you have to work with the city very closely and work with local community groups very closely on how those areas are going to be used. I might jump back and forth a little bit, but this is that master site plan. So 100 Shaman Avenue, it was called 112 at one point, but 100 is a little more catchy. it's the corner anchor here. The existing building that you've seen in those images is, forms the corner of one of the more important streets in the South End, Shaman Avenue and Harold Street. And then the other two properties were owned by a local Chinese evangelical church and by a Chinese community organization with the task of providing affordable housing. And so, this is that 3-building complex that we came up with a lot of connection to the existing street grid, or in fact here where the street grid of Boston had been sort of abandoned in both the north, south, and east, west direction. We were able to create pedestrian connections through the site that break down these super blocks. And of course, that was something that the city was, and local community was very interested in, not having to walk all the way around the site, which is how it was being used, before we started these projects. So just to flip back here, I think you can see where that anchor building is on the corner. To the right would be the existing church building, which is this very low rise 3-story brick building. And then to the left, you can barely pick it up, but there is a supermarket there, just a single story supermarket that's been in the neighborhood for a lot of years. And that's the site of the that affordable housing community initiative, excuse me. So, similar to what Scott was talking about, why are we interested in doing these things? In this case, the developer was very interested in the presence that this building brought to the site and brought to the neighborhood. It's been there since 1912. It forms sort of a marker for folks when they are, traveling around the city of Boston. When are you entering the South End? When you cross the turnpike and you're on Shaman Avenue and you see this brick warehouse building, which actually has a very sort of interesting history. It just, that is the marker of entering this sort of historic district, and the developer really didn't want to lose that. It's something we can put back with, you can see in the background here some of the newer developments in the neighborhood, and they do try to evoke that character. But I think we all can kind of agree that it's not quite the same as something that has lived in Boston for over 100 years. So also the advantages that Scott touched on of energy use and getting lead points for leaving such a massive amount of material around it is very interesting, I think to us as stewards of the built environment. In this case, it's just it was a building that we could use for this purpose, and TAT was brought into the project for I think 2 reasons. One, our experience with historic preservation and adaptive reuse, and 2, for our experience with housing. The developer did look at a number of iterations for things that we could do with this building. Housing was just one of them, and ultimately, that was what we decided to go, as a team decided to go forward with, because it provided the best use for the site and allowed sort of that synergy between the 2 neighboring buildings to take place, where leaving it as office or as other types of conversions might not have had that effect. So the other thing that buildings like this do, this was taken from industrial to office, whereas our building was taken from industrial use to housing. But I think you can see the similarities. I worked on both of these projects. The similarities being that you've got high floors, you've got high capacity on these high floors, and that gives you the ability to add to the building without affecting the foundation system in certain cases. And these are big advantages for projects like this, being able to preserve really important buildings in the fabric of our cities without, needing to do like a facadectomy type of approach, because you have, sort of excess capacity as you move from one use, a higher intensity use to a lower intensity use. And we could talk about that project further, but so this is back to 100 Shawmut. This is, the building as it existed, concrete frame with a brick facade. These really great column capitals. And one of the things that we needed to do here was sort of open up the site to allow a more typical housing profile, about a 65, 66 foot deep building profile, whereas the existing building was about 120 feet deep. I think I have, yeah. So here in the bottom left is the building as it was, and the bottom right is the building as it is today. I think everybody can recognize this as a very typical plan. L-shaped bar, bar building in an L configuration, about the exact dimension that you'd want for efficient housing, access to light at the facade, etc. That wasn't necessarily possible right away when we approached the site. And so TAT proposed, this yellow area of the building to be removed in order to give us the foundation for that L-shaped bar. And in this picture, you're a few months into construction where we've done the removal, and you can kind of see where that column capital is sheared on the right. And that's going to become the home of our new core for the building.
Amazing.
I don't know if it's luck or what it is, but it was definitely a lot of work to come up with various schemes that would pan out, that were attractive to the developer. And obviously that's on, sort of a return on investment scale. But we landed on the ability to modify the existing building and get the core, in a really efficient place, and get a really efficient housing model sort of plugged into the top of this existing building that initially didn't look like it was going to be terribly possible, right? Some of our early studies had these very nice units, but they were really large, and the developer went to the market and wanted feedback on whether they were going to be able to, sell those types of units, and ultimately they weren't going to be. So, we kept working at it, and eventually we got to a pretty typical mix of like 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, studios. There are some big, higher end luxury units in this building, but we were able to produce a building that was pretty normal for what you'd see for housing from something that didn't look like we were going to be able to go in that direction at one point. Couple more shots of what I was just talking about. We preserved on the left, it looks like we tore down most of the building, but we did not. It's just kind of the angle that it's taken from. This is along Shawmut Avenue, and then Harold Street's around the corner. And you can kind of see how we've left what becomes a corridor and a residential unit, along Shawmut Avenue. And similarly along Harold. And then on the right, you see where the core is being inserted up against that existing concrete frame. And this allowed us to meet the newer seismic requirements, since 1910, that buildings like this need to meet, as well as being a, very efficient spot for residents to come in and out of the building. So they come into the existing building, they go up this core, on each floor, they exit through the existing building and then into the added wings without really, noticing that there's this pretty stark transition. And you can see
another developer on the call that wants to know the cost of removing that section of the building as a cost per square foot of the remaining floor area.
What was the
Can you say
that again?
removing that section of the building was I imagine it was pretty costly.
It's in the chat.
Yeah, it was in the chat.
There's a cost per square foot of the remaining floor area. I don't know that I can answer that.
Okay, we'll talk offline. I'll get you, Evan.
Yeah, this was when we were going through the iterations that I was talking about. I believe it was around 2015.
Mhm.
I'm sure I could, dig back into our files and find, what we were looking at, but
It's okay.
yeah,
Keep
yeah,
moving.
I'm trying to come up with something of an answer, right? So it wasn't, I don't know that anybody on this call is going to like this answer, but it wasn't the least cost solution to save the building.
Right.
So I kind of alluded to that with the way that I introduced the building and the interest of the folks that had bought it in preserving this character. And this wasn't, where Scott talks about a building that I think was required to be saved and preserved, and working with agencies and working with funding sources that required all these things. This building was actually, completely funded by private money, and that wasn't necessary. So this really was a choice that was made in the interest of, what you see today, which is a very, I think, evocative resolution to the site that serves as a marker for this neighborhood. In the top corner, in the top left image, you see where we are, and the building across the street from us is a 2-level parking garage, that's been there for a couple of decades. That site is going to be redeveloped, right? Probably in the pretty near future. And, we've sort of set down a marker, or our development team set down a marker for the character of the neighborhood, that has been preserved here, I think, in a way that had we just built a new, steel and glass building, just wouldn't have had the same appeal at the end of the day. But that's a very long-winded answer. I'm sorry.
Yeah, and Jason, I think you hit on a good point with the funding sources, where yours was mostly private. My the Yarn Works was mostly funded with state and federal historic tax credits,
Mhm.
which they require us to preserve the building, not necessarily. We're able to, build on top of stuff like that, but in most cases, we're trying to restore that building to its original state when it was first constructed. So I think you hit it on the head with the private funding that Shawmut received in comparison to the state and federal historic tax credits that Fitchburg used. So
Great. Yeah.
That's correct.
So just back to a little bit on the design of this building. We did engage, one of the community elements in the South End is the South End Landmarks Commission, and they had some purview over this project, not the type that they would have if it was in the district proper. We're sort of adjacent, and we're in their preservation district, not in the historic district proper, where they've cataloged every brownstone and every wrought iron fence and every piece of signage and all that stuff. They're a very intense group, and they do a great job. We're just outside of that area, and we're a building that, while they're certainly interested in it, it didn't have sort of the restrictions that others would in the South End. Probably made it more attractive for our developer, to be honest. But at the same time, in interest of being a good neighbor and in preserving the character of of this part of the city, and seeing the benefit from having this this really nice building as a marker to the entrance of the South End. We had several meetings with them and talked about the form of the addition, as well as the what was going to be done with the with the existing building and what pieces we were going to preserve. And I'll just point out a couple of things that we did. One is the way that the windows are patterned. I think you can probably imagine that we were very interested in getting this this strong division and these large openings to allow us to break up the interior a bit. While these are fantastic where we get them in a living room, in a larger living space, a floor plan just necessitates that you're going to need bedroom spaces and other spaces in an apartment, in a housing unit. So being able to land a demise wall or even just an interior wall of the unit and break these are about 16 feet, was a big help. And we were able to work through with the Landmarks folks, I think, and land on just a really nice solution for how to do these windows. We didn't have terribly good historic photos that went all the way back to the early 1900s. We knew what it looked like along the way, and we knew the windows had been replaced about 3 times. So again, there was kind of this synergy of working together on finding a solution that was a very good experience. They were very interested in the corner pediments, and making sure that we preserve them in a state similar to what they've been in the recent past. There is this coating on the windowsills and on the pediments, and on some of the detailing that we're pretty sure isn't original, but it is what what's been in on this site for at least 40-50 years. And so we went with something that was similar there. It was this like sort of faux terracotta color. It looks a little better in real life than it does in photo. We were able to get all the equipment off the face of the building. These pieces are RF transparent, and there are cell phone towers that are hidden in there. This was a very difficult design challenge, but it was one we were able to meet. And I'm just gonna, maybe I am. I'm going to flip back a little bit here just to show one of the things that they were very interested in. From the street and from many angles, the profile of this building reads very well. So the form of the new addition is set back, and it's differentiated enough that the presence of that that existing building is pretty similar. We did something similar on the Converse building, where when you approach it down the street, you still see the profile of the existing factory building. And I think you get some of the read here, right? Like it doesn't feel like we've just taken a wall and stuck it right on top of the existing wall. The new building sort of recedes to allow the existing building to have sort of the presence that it always has on the site. You can kind of see it there, right? Like you still read all the detail around the top of the cornice. Oh, I guess we did have an image. So interiors, just a couple of images on what we did on the inside. What folks expect in the market nowadays. We are able to produce this in existing buildings as effectively as we can in new construction. We did have some pretty high floor-to-floor heights given the existing factory, and we were able to use that. Even with brand new mechanical systems, we were still able to get some pretty generous floor-to-ceiling heights on some of these amenity spaces. These are lobby, fitness. There's some amenity space up at the roof level, which is pretty spectacular. That gives, this is the interior of that gives these kind of amazing views out over the city. That's this top left corner space.
Gorgeous.
Really, really nice. The other thing, if you're in Boston, you're in the city, these sort of outdoor urban oasis type spaces, I think are very important to people's mental health and enjoyment. I think you've seen in some of the images, we do have balcony spaces for, I think it was like 70% of the units, and they're pretty generous. They're not just oh, I can stand on this. Like, you can have a little table and chair set there, and they're reasonably enjoyable spaces, even around the back of the building. These are pretty large balconies, terraces, and then I think that might be all the images that I have of. Oh, this bottom left is the start of that public plaza. So most of the privately owned public space on the project that was required under the permitting process is on the site of 100 Shawmut. The other two adjacent properties will add to it, but not. The most significant portion was built with the first phase, which I think was important to the community, and that's what you're looking at in the bottom left here. And on the bottom right is above you can see some of our parking garage volume there. Is a private terrace for the residents of 100 Shawmut, and the two spaces are visually connected, and they're certainly open to the same light and air, which makes gives the site this sort of quiet, energetic connection between these two like pretty nice contemplative spaces. The developer with this project wasn't interested in doing like pools and things like that, like more activated exterior spaces. We wanted this to be that, I think, that exterior urban oasis was kind of the buzzword. We included some of the places that this has been published in the presentation. If folks want to go take a look at those, you can see these cut inset balconies that are along most of the residential lines, and certainly at the corners. Did a couple of things that it obviously gave exterior space to the unit owners, but it also, I think, does a really nice has a really nice effect of dissolving the corners of the new addition. Another way that the new building is differentiated from the existing building, which has a very strong presence. We wanted to dissolve the sort of the bulk and not have this thing sort of hover over the existing building.
This is great. Thank you. Do you think we'd be able to share this PDF with members that are interested, or is that okay with you and Scott?
I would think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Great. That'd be great. That'd be great. Thank you. It looks amazing. It just really phenomenal. Both of them are just phenomenal. And it was so hard because there were so many of your projects that I was asked to just pick two, and it was hard, and I can see why, because it takes quite a bit of time to go through all of it. We had a couple questions online. Tony, do you want to unmute yourself and ask?
Yes. Hello.
Hi, Tony.
How are you? Nice to see you, Marissa.
Nice to see you.
Okay. So, we do some work, not really development work, but we do a lot of rehab work in New York City. And obviously, we are able to take advantage of like federal, state, and local grants. But just, in general, when you're looking at these types of new developments or major rehabs, once you take into consideration some of the federal, state, and local grants for those particular projects, do you see a significant upcharge in the development cost for these projects when you're trying to make these buildings sustainable?
That's probably more Yarnworks.
Yeah. For us, I saw your message in the chat, and there is somewhat of an upcharge. We don't get a lot of grants. We take our developers use tax incentives. So and like the funding applications that we did with Yarnworks, we went through the state for the affordable housing tax credits. So essentially what our developers are looking to do, instead of getting, you know, grants and stuff throughout the project to kind of offset that cost, what they're in turn to do is at the end of the project, they're able to go into a permanent loan with less interest and a less overall value on the permanent loan, just based on some of those state and federal tax incentives that are coming through. But in terms of the sustainability, we do see somewhat of an upcharge. Obviously, you know, when you're using spray foam, like a high density spray foam on your exterior walls instead of a bad insulation or a like a thermofiber or something like that, there's definitely an upcharge to some of the materials. But overall, I mean, maybe 10-20%, if that, you know, it's all just you know, it's a cost of the material that you're upcharging to. Like I mentioned before with the paper face drywall, you know, that obviously is a little bit more expensive than just a regular sheet of 5/8, you know, sheetrock. So there is a slight upcharge when we're trying to go for these kind of deep energy retrofits, but then at the same time, you know, the end user, the developer has lower operating costs as well. And then they're also able to market the units as being sustainable and energy efficient, which in turn, you know, leaves very little vacant or unrented units. Yarnworks, for instance, was fully rented and had a wait list within 3 months of it being opened. So
Yeah, I
um,
wanted, is it categorized as affordable housing, Yarnworks?
there is an affordable housing component. It's a mixed income development. So yeah, so there's 39 units that are designated affordable, which is based off of an average monthly income. So they
Uh-huh.
pay for the area of Fitchburg too. So, you know, you're talking Boston, where you know, an average monthly income may be, you know, $4,000, and then you're in Fitchburg and you know, a monthly income maybe $2,000. So it's based off of the AMI, the average monthly income of the region where the project is. So and the good thing is, I mean, there's no real designation between the affordable and the market rate units. There's same
Right.
finishes, same appliances. You know, there's no real designation that you can see between the two of them. There's not one isn't better than the other one. It's the same materials that were used. It was just that these were set aside based off of that funding that we received from the state. 39 of those units were set aside for people that were qualified by the state to receive low income housing. That's
Great. When was Yarnworks completed?
Yarnworks was completed in 2018 is when we finally
2018.
2018,
Uh,
2019, yeah.
we've gone a little bit over. Forgive me, Allison. I know we're supposed to be 1 hour, but this was just such a great presentation. I want to thank you both. I think there's another question. Are these projects all electric? I don't think so.
No.
No.
No, these aren't. Actually, I'm doing a project right now in Lawrence, Massachusetts, which they a few years ago they had the Columbia gas explosions. So they have actually done a mandate that going forward, all buildings cannot have natural gas as a form of energy. So I am doing a deep energy retrofit on an existing mill in Lawrence that was built before the Civil War. It's 170
Wow.
years old. It's going to be an all-electric VRF heating system. So stay tuned. Maybe we could do another presentation on that. That'll be
Follow-up?
finished. That'll be finished in about a year. But really excited about that. It's one of the first in Massachusetts. I'm not sure about the country to go all electric in a historic, preserved. You know, hitting all of the National Park Service, all their standards for preservation. but also going all electric. So that'll be a fun project. So that project's under construction right now.
Super cool.
Wow, that's so cool. Thank you, guys. I mean, I just cold called you, and I appreciate the fact that you get what our mission is all about, and we really wanted to present this to our membership. It's so important. Thank you for what you guys are doing. And let's keep in touch. Thanks for letting us use your PDF for our members. And with that, Della, do you want to wrap this up? Or shall I?
You go right ahead. You've done a fabulous job. They're still putting my ring on.
Oh, no, I mean, we've had some really great webinars. I mean, in fact, I'm going to talk to you guys about maybe submitting for our Grand Prix. We do an award every year. So I'll be talking to you guys a little later in the year. But thank you so much for participating. And everybody, any other questions before we sign off? And seeing none, I will adjourn this webinar. Thank you all for participating, and I'll be in touch. Thank you so much.
Thank
Have
you
a
so
good
much
day.
for the opportunity.
Thanks.
Thanks,
Take
Scott. Thanks,
Thank you
Jason.
so much. Have a great week.
Bye, guys.
Bye, everybody.